Luckily, it's not been too awful hot, and it's not been too cold or too wet or too windy. It's just kind of been where it's at. But so I had a really good live demonstration to do today outside on wind-driven events, in which we had a simulation table and we used straw and so, well, believe it or not, the humidity is so high out there. When I tested it at home, it would not light and it would not work. And I said, that's fine, because we could talk about it, and I actually have a very short video on it that'll go right around. So to speak a little bit about it, I go back to the Swiss cheese analogy. Anybody ever heard of the Swiss cheese analogy when it regards disaster? So everybody eats Swiss cheese, and it's got the holes in the cheese, right? It's the holy cheese. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about? So typically a disaster will not happen until you have at least 3 holes line up on something. That makes sense? Okay? So most of the time, most of the places in the United States or the world, things are generally okay as long as we don't have, you know, when one thing happens, it's okay. When we have 2 things happen, it's not as good, but, you know, normally we're all right. It's normally the 3rd thing or more that lines up that causes a disaster to happen. So when we talk about that, a lot of times we look around, and fuel is around us all the time. We have fuels around us, and basically what is a fuel? A fuel can be anything that can burn. So if we look at outside and we look at the grass, we look at the trees, we look at, you know, obviously the wood in the barn, the fuels are around us all the time. So that's kind of one thing that's a given all the time, right? So the other things you're looking at for a fire to occur, you have to have fuel, you have to have oxygen. Oxygen's around us all the time. You have to have some kind of a heat source, and then you have to have that reaction to sustain the fire. Okay, so a lot of the times we've got the oxygen, we got the fuel. The second hole in that Swiss cheese is a lot of times the ignition source or the heat, right? So we have a fire occur, okay? So a lot of times the fire will remain small and incipient in stage unless it is, unless the environment produces an environment in which that fire will grow, which will be, you had wind, fuel moisture, humidity. All of that takes into consideration and takes into place on how severe the fire will be. So when we talk about, I've got the Smoky Bear signs out there. It's got the fire rating. Has any of y'all seen the fire index signs we've got through the county? That's to educate the public, okay? And those things have been doing a great job, and I've gotten a lot of positive feedback. But what people don't understand is today may be a low fire danger day, and tomorrow it may go up, or it could go the other way. It could be high today and low tomorrow, and it doesn't have to rain or do anything to change that. It has to do with the humidity, okay, and it has to do with the fuel moisture, and the temperature, and a lot of those they all factor into how something will burn. And a good example is if a newspaper. How many of y'all have ever used a little piece of newspaper to start a fire in a house, and it'd be damp and it wouldn't light, something like that. So newspapers are not recommended, number one, to be burnt anyways because of the dyes and things in it. So that's probably a poor excuse or a poor example of that. That isn't the same as cardboard, but like using straw and things of that nature. Like I said, in my experiment yesterday, they would not light. It was dry. It's been in a barn. It's off the ground. There's no reason why it wouldn't light other than the fact that the humidity in the atmosphere absorbed into it. So a lot of times when we look at the fuels, we look at the size of the fuels. Are they small, like limbs and sticks and leaves, or are they larger fuels? And then the size of that depends on how they will absorb or release moisture in the atmosphere. And that's the fuel moisture. And then you have the humidity, which is going to affect how those either will add or subtract from the moisture of those fuels. So when we go back to the Swiss cheese, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to confuse anybody, but we've got the fuels, and the fuels may be dry, which is pretty prevalent in the spring. Our fire season in Sevier County is typically in the winter and the spring. A lot of people think it would be in the summer. But what do we have in the summer with the heat? The humidity. Yeah, it's like miserable. Sometimes you go outside because it's like 90-some degrees. Not like Florida humidity or places like that, but yes, we mimic a rainforest a lot of times. High moisture, you go out, the grass will have that dew and stuff on it. So when things are green, they're lush, and they're full of moisture in Sevier County. So our fire season typically is worse in the fall and in the early spring when the fuels have not haven't greened up yet, so they're dry. So like I said, you've got first hole in the cheese is going to be your fuels and maybe dry fuels, okay? And then the second one is going to be a fire. Well, most of the time we can handle a fire and those type of fuels relatively easy. The problem comes when we line up the third one, and that's the wind. And as we know here in the wind, living in the mountains, the winds make all the difference, okay? Winds can do 2 or 3 different things. They'll either A, dry the fuels out, even if it was moist in the morning and had a good dew. If they're in the sun and the wind blows, any amount of time it will dry it out just like that, okay? So the other thing the wind's going to do is it's going to increase that oxygen. Remember, we said we had to have fire, heat, and oxygen to sustain a fire. So it stokes that fire whenever it blows, and then whatever direction it blows, it's going to actually show the route of it. So a lot of times, you know, we can handle when things are drier. We can handle when there's small fires. But when we introduce the wind aspect to it, that's when we have the issue. And when we have these wind-driven events, a lot of times, you know, you have a front comes with them. A lot of times the winds are going to bring the rain, which is great. But a lot of times you will get the wind for hours before you ever get that rain. So the importance, and you'll see it in the video here, is for resilience of your structures. One of the international building laboratories, they built an ember generator that's 3 stories tall, and it's designed to be able to burn and blow embers, which embers are the #1 thing that start houses on fires and spread the fire, okay? A lot of times that people think it's the big flames, but it's mostly the ember storms that come with these, with the wind. And so what they did is they built this house and they put it on a turntable. And each side of the house has got different material, like hardy board or vinyl siding or wood or something like that. And then each side of the house has got a different landscaping. And this ember generator is throwing these embers at a high rate of speed through the wind, these big fans, they're pelting the side of the house. And you get to see in this video how the house holds up based on the building materials that they used. And, you know, a lot of those studies is what helps us go back out and educate the people. And we're like, you know, maybe you don't need wood shake roofs. Maybe you need to keep those fuels away from, you know, your mulch and your bushes away from the houses. So there's a lot of really good things there. So I'll start this video and I'll kind of narrate what they're doing as we go through there. All right. So this is the structure I was talking about. They used a mix of pine mulch and things as fuels, wooden dowels. They're shoveling these light fuels, the same stuff that you'll find on the forest floor, into these generators, in which they will, you know, be ignited and blown with the fan toward the test house that you'll see here in just a minute. Brand new house built. They've landscaped it, all kinds of different things you would see around your house. This is the reason why we teach Firewise landscaping. I mean, when you go home, you see this in subdivisions around your house, right? Your mulch, shrubs, leaves. And so like I said, this is 3 stories, and it is exhausting embers that you typically would see during a wind-driven event, okay? It's got 150 fans, or 105 fans, and it's blowing about 10 to 20 miles an hour. So 10 to 20, how often do we get 10 to 20 miles an hour winds in this county. That's pretty common. And then during our big fronts, we get 30, 60, up to 80 miles an hour winds, depending on where you live. So you can see immediately with these embers what is getting ignited. And what is it? It's the pine needles that are in the guttering on the roof, and it's the type of fuels that we put right around I say fuels because it burns, but the landscaping that we choose here, and it's right around the structures. So if you notice, the roof is held up fairly well. It's what's in the gutters that has failed, and then around the side of the house, the siding is actually failing. So as you see, the house is slowly turning, and it will be pelting the house with different embers to see the difference in.
Did they do any metal roofing?
Do what?
Metal roofing?
You know, I don't know why they didn't have a metal roof, a metal roof is a Class A roof. So a Class A asphalt shingle and a metal roof, they're going to be good. The only thing about it is you got to be careful about the gutters, because if you let them fill up and it burns up under the soffit, then it doesn't matter if you have a Class A roof or not. You can see here on the side that had the vinyl siding and things, it didn't take very long at all to get it totally ignited. On one side, it's got the openings and the eaves and the soffits with the wire mesh over it, and you'll see the embers from an indoor camera trying to get in, but it actually won't go through, and that's one of the reasons why they want a fine mesh screen over all your soffits and your eaves on the inside, and it keeps those embers from entering into the house.
Can you also use that under a porch? That means you have to worry about.
Yep, underneath the porches, they recommend something similar. If you have like right here, it's a 1/8 mesh screen, and you'll see that, but it needs to be steel, not. That's like yeah. So a lot of people don't think about that. You think, well, we need to keep the birds out, we need to keep the bees out. Well, that was a fiberglass. You need an actual steel paint and get the extra steel screen, and that way that it does not blow through there or melt through there when they have the embers. So, but yeah, there's just so much in the landscaping that we can do, or the homeowner can do, that will prevent things during a wind-driven fire. You know, and the thing is that we think on a normal day, we think on a pretty sunny day, how things look and how fire behavior would be. But the second you turn the winds on, and it changes the ball game. It changes the direction of that fire's travel, and it changes the severity of it. And some things that we've also seen during wind-driven events is we can have everybody in here to a different level of how you maintain your lawn. Like Sharice may have someone blow the leaves from around her home just every day or two, and there not be anything there, and I'm gonna pick on you. But you may not do that and have an abundance of leaves around the house, and when the winds come, where are your leaves gonna go?
Over to their place.
Over to our house. So, that's an unfortunate thing. So if everybody doesn't buy into the Firewise program and like a community or subdivision, then this, the stuff over here can end up there or over there, and it can end up affecting all of that. So there's a lot of it to keep in mind. But the biggest thing is when we talk about wind-driven fires is, remember the Swiss cheese analogy, and you've got to remove the elements out of that, like the fuels from around the homes, and that's going to, and ultimately, I'll just be honest with you, as much as I talk about the Firewise program, it is a prevention method. Okay, it reduces the chance that your home could catch on fire. There's always still an element that it can. I mean, when we start seeing hurricane force winds with our wildfires in the area, there's not much that's going to hold up to that other than a solid concrete house, and putting masonry on the sides and using block, that helps, but it only reduces the chance. So that's pretty much all I have on that. Y'all have any questions about wind-driven fires? Not really?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So if you don't have that screen and you just have those little vent things up in your roof, can you go back and add
Yeah,
that mesh?
yeah, you can go to Lowe's or Home Depot or Carl Ome's or any hardware store that sells the screen, a metal screen, and you can get it and basically just cut it to size. And the good thing, the big thing is just make sure you secure it, staple it around good, so that if there's a rodent or a critter tries to push it out, that it don't just knock it in. So, yep, that's all I have. Thank you so much.
Thank you.